She's Sam.
No, it's around. By the time we finish the no, we have one elected representative there too. Do you think it's good to recognize them?
Yes, I think so.
You see her?
Would you like me to do that? I don't know.
I'm watching to see whether there are others, so that if we have to recognize one, then we have to recognize
That's the problem. Yeah.
Okay. Another thing, the other person we're looking for is the people from the city of the region.
Yes.
So I'm trying to think they won't show up, but it will be too sudden. She didn't know. I'm thinking if they don't show up, then I can just call her to say something on behalf of the city, but that will be too impromptu. So let's just leave it.
Okay. So I'm just introducing all the people here, and then hand it over to you. Okay. So should we get started?
Yes, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I think that we are ready to try to wake up and get started. My name is Harald Sandröm. I'll resolve the mystery for you. My accent is Swedish, and I have no idea why I'm here. I'm secretary of the United States and Africa Development Organization, and it's my tremendous pleasure to welcome you here this morning. We are going to get the proceedings started with some welcomes, and then we will swing right into the first session this morning, where our distinguished colleague, Dr. Ando, is going to walk us through what's going on. So I'm going to just mention all the people who are going to be stepping up here instead of introducing them separately, and then they will take it from there. Dr. Emmanuel Emenyonu is going to be welcoming you on behalf of the main sponsoring organization, the United States and Africa Development Organization. I'm not going to say that anymore. I'm going to say USAADO. It's so much easier. Dr. Ellen Durnan, who is the Dean of the School of Business at the Southern Connecticut State University, is here with us to welcome us aboard. Dr. Michael Cappello, I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, is here also. I don't think that we have a representative from the city of New Haven here with us yet, but if that person arrives, then we will present her also. And Mr. Glenn Cassis, who is the Executive Director of the African Affairs Commission of the state of Connecticut. So Dr. Emenyonu, and I just got to say before he steps up that this guy is a wonder worker. He is an absolutely amazing person. Had the privilege of working with him since the inception of this organization. Emmanuel, take it away.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I won't tell you how much I put into his bank account to say that. It's our pleasure to welcome you to the 2015 U.S. Africa Business Conference holding here at the Macmillan Center, Yale University. USAADO exists to foster economic development between the United States and the countries on the African continent. We are going to be learning a lot today and hearing a lot from businessmen in Africa, from Africa, businessmen from here. We'll also hear from top-notch academicians from here and also from Africa. We're going to be hearing from business executives and on and on and on. Our goal is that based on all what we hear today, we will begin to move the needle in various ways. We want to see economic development, economic interactions increase tremendously. We want U.S. businesses to understand and appreciate the enormous potentials you have in the accelerating economies of various African countries. We want U.S. companies to be alive and awake to the opportunities and begin to take advantage of them. We want to move away from the paradigm of aid to trade. We believe that meaningful, mutually beneficial economic exchanges between African countries and the states in the United States, especially the state of Connecticut, since we started in the state of Connecticut as a result of an enabling state legislation, Bill 880 of 2009. We believe that if barriers to trade are removed and a freer flow of trade happens between the United States and the African countries, it will go a long way to elevate the living standards of people both in Africa and here in the United States. Once again, it's our delight to welcome you. The program today is rich, and we will ask you to sit back, relax, and take it all in. Thank you very much. I would like to call up, Michael, are you ready? Dr. Michael Cappello, the chair of the Council of African Studies here at Yale, and also the co-chair of the Yale Africa Initiative. He's also a professor of pediatric medicine at the Yale School of Medicine. Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. On behalf of the Council on African Studies and the Yale Africa Initiative, it's a pleasure to welcome Dean Durnan, members of USAADO, and distinguished guests here to Luce Hall, which is the home of the Whitney and Betty Macmillan Center for International and Area Studies, essentially the academic hub for international relations, teaching and scholarship here at Yale. Within the Macmillan Center, the Council on African Studies coordinates all of the educational activities within African studies, which includes African language instruction, but also a number of courses focused on issues related to the politics, economics, and history of Africa. So it's really quite a vibrant community of scholars working in many disciplines focused on increasing our understanding and knowledge of Africa. Just to put it in perspective, this semester we have close to 300 Yale College students who are taking courses under the African Studies discipline, and so it's really a sign of the tremendous interest that our students have related to Africa. This conference, our role in this conference is made possible by two things. The first is we have a grant from the Department of Education, the United States Government Department of Education, that specifically provides funds for us to engage in outreach with the community, both locally and globally, to help increase awareness of African studies and to improve the breadth and depth of teaching in African studies. The second reason that we're able to do this is really thanks to Margaret Marcotte, who's our Director of Outreach sitting in the back, who's worked very closely with Emmanuel to help organize this conference today. So thank you, Margaret, for your contributions to this event. The Yale Africa Initiative was announced by President Peter Salovey 2 years ago at his inaugural, and the purpose of that is to increase the opportunities for Yale students and faculty to engage in Africa. And the way that that's going to happen is really manyfold. Importantly, we're trying to increase the number of African students who can come to Yale and be educated here. We're also trying to increase the number of faculty at Yale who can teach in areas related to African studies. And the third sort of component of that, which is something that I feel very strongly about, is to increase or to create meaningful opportunities for students and faculty to engage in work related to Africa, something that really can leverage the existing academic talent that we have here at Yale. And so I hope that we'll have opportunities in the future to collaborate with organizations like USAADO, universities like Southern Connecticut State University, as a way of leveraging our collective expertise to improve the teaching and scholarship of African studies in the region and ultimately globally. So I just want to thank you all for being here today. Again, thanks to Margaret and Emmanuel for the organization of this conference, and I hope you'll have a very enjoyable day.
I'd like to call up Dean Donnan, the Dean of the School of Business at Southern Connecticut State University, to make some welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I'd like to welcome our friends and colleagues from Connecticut and from afar, and I'd like to send a special welcome out as well to our students who are here today. This is a wonderful opportunity for you to learn more about some of the work that goes on locally, globally, and to think about what some of your next steps might be as you go forward. Southern Connecticut State University is very proud to be a co-sponsor of the conference, and I am particularly proud of my colleagues at Southern who have been so involved. You've heard already about Emmanuel and from Emmanuel and what he's done, but also Sam Ando, who's sitting in the front here, and who first explained to me about the organization and why it was so important for us to be involved. And I would say here in Connecticut, we have a couple of reasons to want to engage in these kinds of things. Some of them are altruistic, some of them are much more selfish. But there is opportunity for individuals, entrepreneurs, and business folks, as well as educators here in Connecticut as they work with those in Africa. And I'll talk in just a moment about something that we've been involved with. We have also heard that China is making great inroads into Africa. And, you know, again, from the selfish perspective, some American business folks are saying, why should China get everything? This is a wonderful group of people for us to be partnering with. And we need to be a little smarter and savvier about this and get involved. It also was mentioned that there was enabling legislation by the state of Connecticut to allow us to move forward and partner together. And this was critical, and you'll hear this afternoon from our commissioner from the Department of Economic Development. You'll hear a little bit more about what this means, what this means for businesses in Connecticut. And I would just give one example. Asa Abloy, which is located right here in New Haven, is doing business in Africa. The last thing I would like to say is just take it down from Southern to the School of Business and why this is so important to us. Our vision statement is very short. It's 3 words. Our vision statement for the School of Business is change for good. And that has multiple meanings, and we believe it fits perfectly with what this organization is attempting to do. We also teach our students about what's called in business the triple bottom line, the 3 Ps, people, planet, and profit. And again, the conference and what goes on here is just a wonderful example for our students of what this means. And then the last thing I said, I would mention something specific. Dr. Ando, a few years back, got me involved with Kumasi Polytech University in Ghana. And for years, he's been doing a book drive and sending textbooks to their library. There was a delegation that traveled to visit with us, and we now have a partnership with the faculty there. So we work together, we do scholarship together, we talk about teaching together, and we hope to get to the point where we are exchanging our students as well. So thank you for having me here. I hope you have a wonderful day of rich discussions and connections, and we're glad to have you here in our fine city of New Haven. Thank you.
I'd like to ask Glenn Cassis to come up, but I just got to say before he does that the African American Affairs Commission of the state of Connecticut has been crucial as a partner with us from the very beginning of this organization. And without Glenn's facilitation of it, including having us meet at his office at the state capitol up in Connecticut, we would not be where we are right now. Glenn.
Thank you for those kind words, Dale. As some folks mentioned, somebody's phone is ringing, I think. Okay. Could be the important call. You never know. There you go. As has been referenced before, we had enabling legislation. But let me first say something about the African American Affairs Commission. The commission is established by the legislature, and its main business, or main function, is to promote and improve conditions of African Americans in the state through issues on education, health, political well-being, and business and economic growth. When this enabling legislation came into effect in 2009, under the leadership of some of our key legislators, Ms. Tony Walker, who's our legislator for this area, Representative Tony Walker, thanks for coming. The commission felt it was very important to be responsive to the needs. We had been approached by citizens who were involved with the piece of legislation, and we kept involved with them. We didn't close our doors. We wanted to see this thing happen. So we've been involved since the beginning in 2008. It's very important. It's very timely. It was timely then. It's even more appropriate now. We're living in a global economy, and we need to realize that there's opportunities in our native land of Africa, and we need to be there. So when the legislation came into effect, and you'll talk about it more in the afternoon, it was important for businesses in Connecticut to get the right tools to look forward to and make the right connections to get into Africa. We've been trying to bridge those gaps. We've been working hard to connect business people with nations of Africa, and of course the folks at Southern have been instrumental in making those kinds of things happen. Under the leadership of the Commission and Sandröm, we were able to have students from Southern Connecticut State College do studies on Africa, various markets that would be available to businesses here in Connecticut. That was part of the legislation. There was no funding to do it, but Sam and his class picked up that responsibility, and that information is available. So it's very important. We take it very seriously. We want to see folks in this state of Connecticut to take advantage of this opportunity, and we want to ensure that the United States, and especially Connecticut, and the citizens of Connecticut get an upper hand and be able to do the things that we are talented enough to do. That's it. That's much I want to say on it, because you're going to have a full day. And I heard, we talked about sitting back and listening. It's going to be important for you to be engaged in this. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you can bring things to the table, we certainly want to hear from you. This is not a one-way street. We want to get feedback from you. It's very important. Before I close, I want to say a special thanks to someone who's been more than behind the scenes, has been out in front and doing a lot of work in this, and that's Sabira Gordon. Sabira is in the back there. If you don't know Sabira, get to know her. She has represented not only the African American Affairs Commission, but she has represented the state of Connecticut very well in this whole process and has made this thing really happen. So without her, it would have been very difficult to do this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sam Odu, who will... Oh, okay, I'm going to step away.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay.
Way to go.
Thank you, Dave.
Is Jackie James here from the city of New Haven? If not, I just want to acknowledge the co-sponsorship of the city of New Haven. It's been wonderful to feel so welcomed in this city, and I hope that we will get a chance to hear from her as we move along. It is now my tremendous pleasure to introduce my colleague from Southern Connecticut State University, Dr. Sam Ando, who is a professor of economics there and a member of the board of USAADO, and he directs the Master's in Business Administration program there and has been able to really make that a very strong program. Sam is going to take us through an overview of the African economy and what's going on the continent. Sam is from Ghana, but that does not restrict his view. He's got a very broad overview of what's going on there. Dr. Sam Ando.
My job is actually very simple. Just to give you a broad overview of the continent. With a continent as huge as Africa, there's not a whole lot one can do, even if one were given the whole day. It is a very huge and diverse continent that just about anything you say about it would be true. In this session, I'm just going to give you a brief overview and the potential, especially, it has to offer as a place for serious consideration when it comes to investment. Okay. Just to give you an idea of how huge the continent is, this is a map that appeared in the Economist magazine some years ago. You could literally fit the US, Mexico, China, India, Western Europe into it. And as you can see, you still have a little bit of room left. I mean, that is how huge it is. It's only second to Asia in terms of land mass. It's a very huge continent. It also has 16% of the world's population. That is over 1 billion people. And there are some really, as you can see, about 15 or so % of the world's population. Asia is, of course, by far the most populous. And in Africa itself, there are some very big countries. Of course, topping the list is Nigeria, 166 million, and projections are that in the not too distant future, that population will probably not stabilize until it's about 500 million, and that's huge, 500 million people. Ethiopia is also quite large. So actually, there are some very, very large countries on the continent. Now, from colonial times, and by colonial times, I suppose I date it back to when Europe first partitioned Africa into various spheres of influence. Africa's growth has been mainly exports of minerals, primary commodities, timber, gold, diamonds, coffee, oil, etc., etc. These have been the things that Africa has depended on for growth. It is still home to about 1/3 of the world's mineral reserves, 1/10 of its oil deposits, and 2/3 of diamonds. And so I suppose in the near future, in the immediate future, it is going to continue to export these commodities. Increasingly, however, the economies are getting more and more diversified, in part the result of improved governance and economic reforms. Now, all of these have contributed to make the continent among the fastest growing in the world. There is no doubt that some of the countries still have a long way to go. But the World Bank's annual report on doing business reports that Sub-Saharan Africa did more to improve regulations than any other region in the world. In fact, there are some countries such as Mauritius and Rwanda that are the easiest places to do business. And some of them are actually friendlier than some European countries. And the World Bank estimates that this year the continent will grow at about 5%, which is paltry. Now, if you drill down a little bit, you see even more interesting details. Between 2000 and 2010, Angola grew at 11.3%. Now, if a country is growing at 11.3%, basically it means that the size of the economy is doubling just about every 7 years. I mean, that is a tremendous growth rate. It dipped in, expectations are that it will grow at only 4.5% in 2015. This are estimates from the IMF, 3.9% in 2016, but pick up in 2017. Countries like Chad, which you probably don't think much about, they're all doing very well. Of course, the perennial powerhouses are Ethiopia, Ghana, Nigeria, even Sierra Leone, Uganda, Zambia, and Kenya. They're all doing very well. And these are economies that are actually increasing the size of their middle classes at a very rapid pace. Now, and growth is now coming from other sectors besides the extraction of minerals, manufacturing services, manufacturing and service sectors are all growing very, very rapidly. And in many parts of Africa, tourism, although still it's in infancy, is still growing very, very quickly. These days, when I fly from Delta direct from JFK to Kotoka International Airport in Accra, I am amazed at the number of Afro-Americans in the airplane. And then if you do the same from Frankfurt, from London, or any European city, I mean, it's surprising how many Europeans are trooping to Africa. So there is a lot going on in there. Foreign direct investment grew by 5% in 2012 and 10% in 2013. And this notwithstanding the fact that the world economy was virtually stagnant. Now, the potential for higher returns in Africa is quite high. Now, many investors unfamiliar with the continent tend to overestimate the risk in the regions and assign the same risk to all of the countries. This, of course, makes all of the countries unattractive places to invest. But as I just indicated, there are some very, very stable, fast-growing countries which, with careful study, can provide good returns to investors. Of course, the size of the continent itself is something to talk about, the endowment of natural resources, and all of these point to the fact that there is a lot to be expected in the near future. West Africa, for example, is expected to grow the fastest on the continent, and in 2013, it grew at 6.7%. Let me give you an indication of what this means for returns. In the US, when our economy grows at 3.5%, we are excited because that is our potential. If we grow at 3.5%, we are growing at what we are capable of growing. But because these African countries are starting from such a very low base, they can grow at a very rapid pace, 10%, 11%. And because, again, they're starting from a very low base, we can expect that they will grow at these rates for quite some time. So the potential to earn higher returns over a long period of time does exist. Again, the West African region is expected to continue to attract investment, although they are still going into oil and minerals. As the middle class grows, you would expect that some other things are going to follow suit. East Africa has been doing remarkably very well. It also grew 6% in 2013, and it was expected to grow at 6.4% in 2014. Now, Ethiopia will continue to be a very strong performer. Ethiopia, in the last few years, actually has built a very huge dam, capable of providing more than enough power for its people and to some of the countries in the region. And it has been a perennial strong growth country for quite some time. Now, this growth, of course, should fuel consumer spending in natural gas, construction, transportation, telecommunications, as well as others. In the south of the continent, growth is projected to increase from 3.6% to 4.2%, mainly because of labor unrest in South Africa. Now, Mozambique and Angola in recent times have done remarkably very well, mainly because of huge coal deposits, offshore gas discoveries, and it's been attracting foreign investment. Of course, the same is true in Zambia's copper sector and uranium mining in Namibia. Central Africa is also not doing badly. Unfortunately, unrest in the northern part of Africa has dimmed growth prospects there for a while. But until the Arab Spring, the northern part of Africa had some of the stronger economies on the continent. Now, in order for these high projected growth rates to be translated to increases in standards of living, the growth, which we observe, has been propelled mainly by commodity extraction and exports, should now move into local processing to enable job generation and the spreading of the wealth. Capital-intensive industries tend to concentrate the wealth in a few people's hands, but we see that there is opportunity for the growth to spill to other sectors of the economy. Now, There are some barriers to even rapid growth. Most of the countries in Africa are landlocked, and although there are some navigable rivers, they are few compared with other countries. The railway is one mode of transportation that could promote intra-African trade, but in most places it is still very underdeveloped. Now, the domestic air travel is still very, very much in its infancy. There are not too many connections, and so there's still room there for growth. Road transportation is still difficult in several parts of the continent. So all over the continent, several countries do not have, especially, enough power to supply the needs. I remember some 40 years ago, Ghana had more than enough power and exported some of the power actually to its neighboring countries. The rapid growth has nearly exhausted all of it. And the result of this rapid growth has been that in places like Nigeria, you have something they call never expect power always. For NEPA, which actually means that Nigerian Electric Power Authority, and in our usual fashion, because there's almost always not power, now it's never expect power always. In Ghana, they have come up with Dumso, which is a practice of, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. And 40, 50 years ago, there was so much power, but now it's not enough. So there is a tremendous need for energy-related infrastructure to help support the growth that is taking place. Now, it is true that some countries are high-risk areas because of ethnic and religious conflicts. But there are several that are good bets even in the short run, and certainly in the long run. Ethiopia, Ghana, Botswana, Nigeria, Senegal, Gambia, Uganda, Kenya. These are some of examples of countries that are stable, have demonstrated steady growth, and should provide very good